Hi everybody, my name is Mike Benninger. I own chefmike.ca and timemanagement.ca, and today I'm going to show you how to take one of these apart. This is the filet mignon or beef tenderloin cut. You buy this at Costco, Walmart, Sam's Club, places like that. When you buy it this way, it's at least half the price of buying steaks and roasts from the grocery store. Bit of time, bit of knife work, half an hour, sure to save $100.
So you can see I moved into my kitchen and put my whites on. Our roast is kind of triangular shaped. You got a large end and a smaller end. I find it easier to work from the larger end. Kind of use your fingers and press the flesh away from the edge. Use a knife, kind of cut the whole thing off, and it pops right out from the larger end. Now there's this fluid inside. It's a protein solution. Don't worry about it. It's a preservative. With that, they can keep for several weeks inside the bag. So you got it all patted down now. You put it back on your board. You turn it over and start from this side. What there is in the middle is this very, very tough membrane. It runs the entire length of the loin. First thing I do is kind of use my fingers to separate it from the meat so I don't scar the meat, and then kind of cut it down the middle. What it actually does is it creates basically three pieces of your loin. The center part, which is where all of your money really is spent, and then the front part, which I affectionately call the chain meat, and the back part, which is a large muscle. I've heard it called things like the pemkis or the hump. I don't really know. It's just a large muscle at the back. It's very lean. What we're going to do now is kind of separate a few things off. First things first, though, you want to clean this up as best you can and use your fingers as much as you want here. Unless you're really good with a knife, there's little bits and stringy bits that are around there that are kind of unpleasant for some people. I'm going to use my knife now and just separate this out, leaving the center piece as large as possible, but trying to maintain that round shape. What we're going to do is take this chain meat off. So I removed the chain meat. Now what I'm going to do is turn it around, and we're going to work on this piece of meat in my right hand. This is a very interesting piece. It's very, very lean, but it's not particularly normally shaped. You can't make it into a steak too easily. So what I think the best solution is to do what butchers do, is create what's called a butt tender. What a butt tender actually is by including the last 3 or 4 inches of the actual loin and that actual piece of meat, you have a bigger piece of meat to work with, and it's much easier to turn into steaks that are usable. What that'll also do is leave us with the primary piece of meat that we bought this for, which is the main loin, in one long piece, and we can process that a little bit later. So now we're left with the gold. This is the main loin itself. The first thing you have to do on the loin is get rid of this nasty silver skin. Slip your knife in, angle your knife up, pull up towards you, and try to get up as much as possible of the actual silver skin and as little meat as possible. So now we're down to the main loin itself. What I like to do is to kind of rotate it around until I can see where it changes size dramatically. And that's usually at the skinny end, away from the main muscle. That's about 3/4 of the way down. And notice how I saw with a single stroke back and forth? You don't want to saw back and forth, that just makes it jagged. But that's beautiful meat in my hand there, so that's going to go in there, our bowl. We'll come back for that in just a minute. Now my wife and I, we're more roast people than we are steak people. So what I'm going to do is take this and cut it in half first. Notice that, long single strokes. Then cut those in half again, and those in half again. Now what we probably have here is enough for 3 people in each one of those roasts. Unless you're big gluttonous meat eaters like I am, in which case it's only 2. But at the minimum, there's 8 portions there. This whole roast only cost $85. You're down to $10 a portion for filet mignon, which is half the price of a restaurant already. So what I've done is move all of the roast into a glass baking dish in front of me here, so you can get a sense of just how big they actually are. At least 2 of them will handle 3 people, and 2 smaller ones. So there's 8 or 10 pieces right there. The next thing we're going to do is work on the offcuts. This is the end of the loin. What I want to do is kind of cut that very first steak off about 2.5 inches thick, or the width of that bone space. The bone space are those little white things. Then we move to the smaller end, cut the very end off of that, because that's not going to really stay together anyway. And on the side, there's probably another little piece that won't stay there, so we'll get rid of that. Next, we're going to do what's called a butterfly cut. We're going to take it and go right down the middle of the 2 pieces, about 90% of the way through, so there's a piece to hold it together still. Notice how I go all the way through and don't saw. That's a nice, easy method. Then there's my 2 exposed cut sides. With a bit of kitchen twine, that'll turn into a beautiful steak. Quick and easy. You see it in restaurants and grocery stores all the time for pork chops. Now we're going to work on the butt tender, which is the large piece off the end. The first thing we have to do here, though, is using our knife, get rid of any silver skin, fat, or other stringy bits that are on top of it that we don't want to eat. So now we're left with the butt tender. What I'm going to do now first is take a big knife and go right down the middle. See that? How you saw right through it, back and forth. There are 2 basic roasts here, very small ones, but they would cook up quite nicely. One we'll put in the front of the board for right now, but the second one we need a paring knife. Got to clean up some of the silver skin, tendons, and other pieces that are on it. So now when you take a look at these, you can see these are actually quite large pieces for one person, and the shape really wouldn't be right for a steak. So you have to make the decision whether or not you want to cut them in half or cut them into steaks and try to butterfly them or tie them together. I often leave them as little roasts. That's what I usually do. My wife likes her meat fairly rare, so I'll take something like that, sear it on all sides, finish in the oven for 20 minutes, and that'll be how we'll do it. So now when you start taking a look at all these little roasts and steaks and things like that, you realize just how much we're getting out of all of this. Without a lot of work, already in front of me in that glass dish is probably 12 or 13 portions. When you consider the whole thing only cost $100, we've done pretty well so far. Now comes the chain meat. So now comes the most difficult part of this whole thing, and this is the chain meat. The chain meat runs the entire length of the roast, probably weighs a pound or a pound and a half on a roast that big. So, you know, at 20 bucks a kilo, there's 20 bucks in front of you. So you obviously want to work on this and try and get as much value as you can out of it. What I tend to do is use a small paring knife and try to get all the silver skin, muscle, sinew, tendons, all those things. I try to get rid of those first and get as much of it off as you possibly can. That's the ones that are attached to the outside of the muscles. There will be pieces that will be strung through and intertwined with the various musculature itself. That's not in the loin. There's only so much you can do about that. That being said, though, if you're not comfortable working on the loin as your first case and you want to work on your knife skills, starting on the chain meat and practicing on that is a pretty good alternative to actually wasting any of the other meat that's on the loin itself. What you'll find, though, is the chain meat is probably, I would say maybe half of its weight and half of its volume will be taken up with sinew, muscle, gristle, and other things which are inedible. So you can keep on working on this as much as you want. At some point in time, though, you'll have to cut into smaller pieces, and you'll probably end up with about 3 fairly evenly sized pieces with different amounts of fat and sinew and stuff worked through them. These are really best served making things like Philly cheesesteaks or making things, roast beef sandwiches, something pan seared, or folks like theirs fairly well done. That's actually a pretty good use for the chain meat. If you actually want to make a steak out of it or make it something a bit lighter like that, I'm afraid you're really going to have a big problem. This stuff has more. So after 5 or 6 minutes of knife work and cutting, what we end up with now is the chain meat down to these 2 small pieces, which when you combine with the 12 or 13 pieces that we actually have in the roast, which is enough to feed a family of 4 for 2 or 3 good meals, that 80 bucks, and there's all of our waste, that 80 bucks looks pretty good. I hope you enjoyed this examination of taking apart a beef tenderloin. If you have any questions, go to www.chefmike.ca or timemanagement.ca and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. See ya!